Beginning in the 1830s, businessman Daniel Saunders began to purchase land in Massachusetts with the hope of establishing a manufacturing town. With the eventual partnership with the Essex Company, a group of Boston businessmen, Lawrence, Massachusetts was incorporated as a town in 1847. The power of the Merrimack River was harnessed by mills in the town, and people from all over came to work and reside there. Because this town was created for the purposes of manufacturing, with many people from many different walks of life seeking employment, Lawrence became a town with slightly more visible diversity in it. People from different states, countries, and racial and cultural backgrounds came to the area and made up the community in Essex County. In 1853, the Essex County Jail was established in Lawrence and served all the surrounding towns contained in Essex County. The meticulous records kept by the jail served to give a sense of the diverse population of Lawrence and immediately surrounding areas. Because the jail kept such extensive records, it is possible to see more clearly some of the people that called Essex County home and contributed to its history and growth. Though this represents only part of the population, records this extensive were rarely kept at the time, making them valuable sources of information. The records containing the most information on prisoners were the monthly registers. These registers listed all of the intake information for inmates and included details such as name, birth date, birthplace, parents' name and birthplace, education, occupation, children, religion, race, crime, and sentence. Of the myriad of people that called Essex County home, the Black community that existed in Essex County is of particular interest. With the northern states typically being thought of as predominantly white states, being able to look at records of African Americans in the jail that document details like name, birth date, birthplace, job, education, parentage, and so on helps to paint at least part of a picture of what the African American community might have looked like in Essex County in the 19th century. The acknowledgement of the African American community in New England throughout its history is important because it is a history that is not often remembered. Though these records only communicate the details of the incarcerated African Americans' lives, they serve to show how African Americans were a part of the fabric of life that makes up New England history. Because these records are so detailed, it is possible to research these men and women more extensively and acknowledge the Black community as an integral part of New England society. One such prisoner that had more information available upon further research is prisoner number 3581, Henry Freeman, who was admitted to the Lawrence State Prison or Jail in October of 1874. Freeman is listed as a 34-year-old married man from Reading, Massachusetts. He is listed as having no property or education, and his profession is not noted. However, more information is available on Freeman because of the nature of his crime: murder. Though many of the crimes of those admitted to the jail were petty, like drunkenness and larceny, some of the more heavy crimes garnered more attention through outlets like newspapers. This is certainly true in Mr. Freeman's case, and the story received coverage in newspapers such as the National Aegis, the Boston Traveler, the Boston Journal, and the Springfield Republican. Freeman only spent 5 days in the Essex County Jail before being taken to Superior Court for sentencing, and newspapers document the events of the alleged murder more thoroughly. Freeman, who is listed as a farm worker, and an Irishman by the name of Daniel Kelly were accused of the murder of their friend Frank Young after a night of drinking. It was thought that this was the result of a drunken altercation that neither man could fully remember. Through the coverage of this case, we learn specific details about Freeman's life that tell us a sort of role that some African American men in New England may have filled in society. Freeman is listed as a farm worker. He seems to have a bit of money and independence for himself as he purchases the gun that is found next to the body of Young and has money on him when he's arrested. Perhaps he had purchased this gun to protect himself on the road. He also has money to travel to Salem to meet his companions and go drinking with them. These sorts of details tell us that Black members of New England society had a presence and that they were partaking in society in some of the same ways that white New Englanders were, working hard and earning money to try and enjoy the fruits of their labors. Freeman and his fellow accused were ultimately not convicted of murder and freed after a grand jury found no bill or insufficient evidence to support a case against them. Another prisoner that showed up in further research was prisoner number 1699, John Bell. Bell is listed as a black man from North Carolina and was jailed in October of 1866. Bell is also enlisted in the Army, and his crime is recorded as failure to report. He spent 10 days in the Essex County Jail before being transferred to Salem. Because Bell was a military man, it is possible to search for him in the Army records of the time. A possible match for Bell comes from a company descriptive book that details his enlistment as September of 1864. It also points to his enlistment being for the term of 3 years. When Bell is arrested for failure to report in 1866, he is just under a year shy of his discharge date. Perhaps Bell was unsatisfied with his time in the Army, but we will never know the reasons for his failure to report. However, his appearance in not only the jail listing but the company descriptive book for the Army represents another crucial role that African Americans filled during this time, that of servicemen. No matter the terms of his status in the Army at the time of his arrest, Bell represents a portion of the black citizens that committed their lives during the 19th century to the protection of the country. Men were not the only prisoners in the Essex County Jail. One of the first black prisoners that appears in the Essex County Jail archives is Caroline Freeman. Caroline was arrested in April of 1864 and is listed as a 37-year-old colored woman born in the town of Newburyport, Massachusetts. It is noted that she is a Protestant and has no formal education or property, and that she had been arrested once before. Her crime is listed as larceny, and she was arrested along with her husband, John Freeman. John is interestingly not listed as colored in the same way that Caroline was, and they were both transported to the Essex County Jail on April 13th. Caroline's minimus, or individual arrest record, sheds some more light on her crime and experience in the House of Corrections. Caroline was first held in prison in Ipswich from February 12th, and then transported to Lawrence after her official sentencing. Both she and her husband John were sentenced to 6 months hard labor, to be counted from the original February arrest. This sentence reveals an interesting distinction between the House of Corrections and the jail at Lawrence, presumably two separate wings of the jail. Caroline and her husband were remanded to the House of Corrections and given a sentence of hard labor. Presumably this hard labor was meant to be a part of the corrective process to reform the convict, whereas those housed in the jail were not sentenced to work to be reformed, but were instead expected to serve out longer sentences in the jail for more serious crimes. Because all of the details that Caroline's record provides, it is possible to find more documentation of her life. She and John appeared to have been married in Salem on July 16, 1846. Documentation of this kind showcases not only the presence of African Americans in New England, but also the process of family building that Black Americans were participating in. A marriage record emphasizes the roots that these people had in their communities in New England. Caroline Freeman's death record from August of 1868 in the town of Essex also showcases her permanence up until her death in New England communities. African Americans were not the only representatives of racial and cultural minorities in Lawrence at the time. Charles Newhall, prisoner number 4119, was imprisoned in the House of Corrections in November 1867 for drunkenness. He is listed as Indian and comes from Old Town, Maine, a place that has a major presence of indigenous Penobscot people. Charles would have likely come to Lawrence to be able to work and provide for his family back home, and it is evidence that he had some money as he paid his way out of jail rather than serving a sentence. Charles also appears in an 1880 census for Lawrence, showcasing his continued presence in the city. The presence of an indigenous person in Lawrence speaks to the environment that made-for-profit towns provided in terms of racial and cultural diversity. These more personal examples then serve to illustrate how towns such as these can be windows to seeing New England as a place that has history built from a variety of peoples. The true story of New England is not one that is completely homogeneous. African American and indigenous people participated in the daily life of New England and helped to build New England society over time. Just because they are little acknowledged does not mean that they were not here. Jail records, such as those that were produced by Essex County Jail, provide more details about African American New Englanders than most any other public records available. Of course, the fact that jail records provided much more detail on Black citizens than censuses and city directories often did can point to some of the attitudes that New Englanders held about Black Americans being geared towards the negative. Documentation is scarce unless it involves the documentation of some negative act that a Black New Englander was alleged to have participated in. This realization supports the continued attitudes of some Americans towards Black Americans up into present day. The willingness to have a mass incarceration and negative documentation of Black Americans still pervades modern society and the prison system. Studies of records such as the Essex County Jail records can shed new light on these Black New Englanders and give a new appreciation for the people that were here, along with raising our awareness for how Black Americans are treated by our prison systems today.